to another Apollo Papyrus episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a storyteller, playwright, comedian, and on May 13th, we'll host the Your Story Matters Unmute Yourself Writing and Storytelling Workshop. Her name is Ann Randolph, and here's my interview with Ann. Ann Randolph, welcome to Apollo Papyrus.
Well, great to be here with you.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I am a writer and performer of solo shows, which is like 80-minute theater pieces where I play all the characters, and they're incredibly funny. Mel Brooks produced my show off Broadway. That's how I got my break. And I also teach people around the world to teach their own life story as a way of healing, transformation, and also get their books out in the world if they want to be published. And I have many published authors in my workshops. As a playwright, what plays have you written? I have written Squeezebox. I have written Loveland. I have written the current one, Inappropriate in All the Right Ways, Shelter, and Down Home. On May 13th, your online writing workshop called Your Story Matters Unmute Yourself will begin. Without spoiling too much about your upcoming workshop, what will it be about? Well, every day I get online and we have a little meditation. First, we have an invocation, and I'm not a woo-woo person, but I believe that when you settle the mind, you're more receptive to what wants to be written. And then I give a prompt. I might, pick a poem by David White, or I'll pick some prompt, a reading, and then I ask the writers in the room to write for 35 minutes, and we all write together. There's just about over 100 to 200 people in there. And then the last 10 minutes, I do a teaching and about structure and narrative and storytelling. And it's a beautiful community of kind creatives. How long will the workshop last? Well, it's every day for an hour, Monday through Friday. It lasts for a month, and then I take a break for a month, and I come back for a month. So it's every other month we do it, and it's a very profound, people have written books out of there, solo shows out of there. It's happening in that room, for sure. It's where writers go to get their practice and to generate tons of content. How much will entry to the Your Story Matters workshop cost, and how can one join the workshop? It costs $169, and you can join by just going to my website, annrandolph.com, and you'll see the tab, Your Story Matters, or Unmute. It's called Unmute Yourself, Your Story Matters, and you click on that, and you can join the workshop. And I also have upcoming shows that you can see that I have written that I'll be performing in New Mexico, Taos, Santa Fe, and then I'll be traveling to Mexico City and performing that show as well. Will the Your Story Matters workshop be for authors, playwrights, other types of writers, or a combination thereof? Combination thereof. And there's some people just in their writing to understand themselves and to mine, like their internal conflicts, right? It's very deep. It's also, because I'm a comedian, there's a lot of humor in there too, but it's the sacred and the profane, the reverent and the irreverent. Why is storytelling important, whether it be as an author of a novel or oral storytelling as an actor or comedian? Well, I think that really links us to one another. It's our shared humanity, storytelling. And when we hear somebody share a story that's very vulnerable or maybe very painful or something embarrassing or taboo, when we hear somebody share a story like that, we often identify with that story, with those feelings, and it gives us permission within our own being to allow that within ourselves. Why is censoring one's own truth not a good idea? And can you give an example of why censoring one's own truth isn't a good idea? Well, it is not a good idea because, look, that truth lives in you, resides in you. It's that still small voice in you. And I think you compromise yourself, your soul, when you censor yourself. And so it's very important that you feel free to be able to speak what is true to you. And it's scary, for many people, because if they speak that truth out loud, first of all, somebody will hear it and they might not agree with them, or they might shame them, or they might make them feel bad. But if one doesn't speak it out loud, then it stays in there. I think it was Brene Brown had this wonderful quote that shame loves secrets. So shame wants you to stay secretive and not speak your truth, right? To keep you safe. But it's super important that you do it, that you say out loud what you're feeling, even if nobody else feels that way. And it takes incredible courage.
What is it like to be a solo performer on stage? And did you get stage fright early on in your career?
Oh, I still get stage fright. I think all performers get stage fright. I think Sir Laurence Olivier, the greatest actor, would always vomit before he went on stage. I think it's very normal to get stage fright. And, it comes with the territory. And I always tell my students that, that fear is not going to go away. It's with you. Anytime you're creating, you're going to face fear and resistance and anxiety, but you do it anyway, because that calling within your soul is so deep. And you know that your story can be a gift, not only to yourself when you release it on the page, but a gift to others.
Was it true that you were the only woman on a boat or ship for about a year or so? And if true, what was that experience like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I lied. I did not speak my truth. I told they were looking for people to drive a skiff after the Exxon oil spill, and which is a small boat. And I had this idea, well, how hard could it be to learn how to drive a skiff? That's like, a little 35, I don't know how many horsepower motor. And so I said I knew how to do that. And so I got hired and I go out to sea for a year on this like little 150-foot research vessel. And they were 13 guys from Louisiana from the oil rigs up there. And I was the only woman on the boat. And they were mostly like, good old boys. And I just, over time, it was hard because look, I'd never been around racism and sexism before. And there was one guy on the boat who was from the Philippines, and he was probably a foot shorter than me. And I fell in love with this guy on this boat. He was a theater major of all things out here in the middle of Alaska. And because I was hanging out with him all the time, first of all, his name was a motto. They never learned his name. They called him Julio. Julio, get this. Julio, start the engine. So I was like, this is crazy. His name's a motto. And then they were also, when I would come into the galley to eat, they'd be like, more ass for the plow driving man behind it. So these were things I was not used to, besides they watch porn a lot on the boat. But over time, what I saw was, we all shared, once again, stories connected us, because on nights, when the seas were really, really big and rough, we all missed our family and friends. We all missed people. We had this shared sitting around telling stories, even though they had different beliefs and values than I did. We found a way to get along. And by the end of that year, I feel like we were a close family saying goodbye to one another. It was a really beautiful experience. But initially, I was like, this is hardcore. So, yeah. It was also beautiful to be out at sea, in Alaska in the winter and spring and fall. I mean, it was just every season. It was just stunningly beautiful.
Was it true that you ended up performing R-rated shows at a church in Hawaii?
I love your questions. Yes, it's true. I didn't, again, I think there's a lot of synchronicity in my life and callings. And I found myself at this church. I had a friend of mine, actually a student, invited me to Kauai, of all places, and I'd never been there, for a vacation. And I was, just enjoying myself. And I was meeting a lot of local people. And they asked what I did. And I said I was a solo performer. And they said, you should do your show here in Kauai. And I like, there's no theaters in Kauai. Where would you do a show? And they go, do it at the Church of the Pacific. I'm like, my shows are rated. They go, just go talk to the church secretary. So I go talk to the church secretary and I say, I hear I can do a show here. And she goes, yeah, you can do whatever you want here as long as you remove the crucifix when you perform. And I said, Okay, it's R-rated. She goes, that's okay. So I ended up this wonderful church in Kauai, Church of the Pacific. It allows everything. They're very community minded, and they have the food bank there. They have the evacuation center there for the North Shore of Kauai, and they want to support the community. And I love that about them. They're not like saying, oh, you need to go to church here. So they're often opening up their doors on and letting people do shows and music events. Michael Fronte, the hip hop artist, was there. So it's a great, great church.
What did you learn from working with Mel Brooks and Alanis? I might be mispronouncing this person's name. Alanis Morissette.
Alanis Morissette, yes.
Alanis Morissette. I think I was pronouncing
she's
the
a rock
first
and
name
roller.
wrong.
That's okay. She's a pop star. She's wonderful. From Alanis, I learned so much. Well, both of them. Alanis, she had such a incredible way of speaking about deep subjects from, oh my gosh, relationships, trauma, attachment, and she had a bookshelf, which might as well have been like a library of all these incredible books that she turned me on to. And also in regards to art, I just have the greatest admiration for her as an artist and her work ethic. But she opened me up to a way of subjects and healing in a way that I hadn't thought about before. And then we ended up teaching together in Esalen, and I love that experience. And with Mel Brooks, he's just the comedy master. There's no better one. So he helped me get better and better at my humor and to really synthesize my story to get it down to its, bare facts. Not bare facts. I'd say just streamline the narrative. He was excellent at streamlining the narrative.
We've covered the upcoming Your Story Matters Unmute Yourself workshop. Have you held any previous writing retreats or workshops other than that one?
Oh, yeah. I lead them all the time for the last 25 years. I lead them around the world. I've led week-long retreats in New Zealand, in Barcelona, in England. And I have one coming up now in Santa Fe. It's sold out, but I have another one coming up in Mill Valley in October for a week. You can come study with me. And then in the past, I've taught at Omega and Esalen and Kripalu, teaching people their life story. So lots of times of teaching people how to take the stage and speak their truth out loud.
My final question for this interview, have you ever thought about writing a book? And if so, what ideas do you have in mind for books that you may or will write in the future?
I think I would take this current play, this show that I'm performing, and turn it into a book, which is really lessons that I have learned from. First of all, my start was, in sketch comedy wearing wigs and doing broad characters. So the journey of me as an artist from learning to be more and more authentically true to my own voice and not hide behind characters. And also the journey of what it's like, of resilience, of faith in pursuing an artistic career. So I think it would be an inspirational book.
Ann, you were an amazing guest. I apologize for bumbling through the interview a little bit, and I thank you for appearing on Apollo Papyrus.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you.
In a departure from normal practice, my interview with Ann was recorded after some other interviews I haven't yet uploaded the episodes for, but I will be uploading those episodes throughout the first half of this month. This is due to Ann's workshop beginning May 13th. If I didn't upload her interview out of order, the episode would have been uploaded a few days after the 13th, and I wanted our listeners to know about the workshop before it begins. With that said, it was amazing to interview Ann and discuss storytelling and other topics. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write and read your passion. Bye for now. Remember to subscribe to the Apollo Papyrus YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/@ApolloPapyrus and the Apollo Papyrus Substack newsletter at apollopapyrus.substack.com. Y'all can visit the Apollo Papyrus website at campaaronapollo.wixsite.com/Apollo Papyrus and follow Apollo Papyrus on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Apollo Papyrus. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.